We usually think of translation as a pretty straightforward process, right? Like swapping out parts in an engine. You just take a word from one language out, you drop the corresponding word from another language in, and boom, the sentence runs just fine.
Yeah, there's definitely this comforting illusion of a one-to-one exchange. I mean, we just assume an apple is an apple, right?
Well, right.
No matter what alphabet you use to spell it or, what century you happen to be writing in.
Right. But today, we are heading into some seriously muddy linguistic waters. We're doing a deep dive into a stack of sources that completely blow up that mechanical view of translation.
Oh, absolutely.
Because, think about it. What happens when you perfectly translate a word, but the society you live in completely changes the underlying definition of that word?
Yeah, that's when things get messy.
Exactly. Suddenly, your perfect translation becomes this massive linguistic trap. And our mission today is jumping right into the center of the biggest trap in the 1611 English Bible, which is the word father.
It really is arguably the most consequential translation gap in all of Western literature. I mean, the transition of the word father from an ancient social title to a modern, biological descriptor, it's created a monumental amount of linguistic confusion for modern readers who are just trying to understand ancient historical and religious texts.
Yeah, I was reading through the historical context in our sources, and what immediately struck me is that the ancient Mediterranean concept of a father had almost nothing to do with DNA.
Right, nothing at all.
Like when we hear the word today, our brains immediately go to biology. We think of genetics, male reproduction, a physical progenitor. But in the Greco-Roman and Near Eastern worlds, it was essentially a job title. The sources refer to it as the social architect.
Yeah, the exact term you'd find in the Greco-Roman world is the paterfamilias. And, calling it a job title is actually highly accurate. Yeah, in those ancient contexts, the paterfamilias was fundamentally a functional and legal designation. You were defined entirely by your authority, your role as a protector, and crucially, as the ultimate source of law and order for a household or an estate.
Okay, let's unpack this, because you could hold that title for people you weren't even related to, right?
Oh, exactly. You could be the paterfamilias to adopted adults, to servants, to extended dependents, where there was absolutely zero biological connection.
Wow.
Yeah, your status wasn't about your genetic material at all. It was about your social function, like what you physically and legally did to sustain and govern that microsociety.
Which brings us to the year 1611. The translators of the King James Bible sit down to render these ancient concepts into the English language. They're looking at texts describing the divine, and they need an English word to convey this concept of the ultimate sovereign source.
Right, the ultimate authority, protector, lawmaker.
Exactly. So they choose the word father.
And honestly, based on the classical understanding of the word at that time, it was the most logical choice. They were using father as a literal description of a legal and social role.
Right.
The translators were absolutely not suggesting that the divine had like a physical body or genetic material or was a biological male progenitor. They were assigning a functional governing title.
But the problem is, society didn't freeze in 1611. Science advances. We map the human genome. We develop this much deeper understanding of biology. And slowly, over centuries, the dictionary definition of family and fatherhood starts to shift.
Yeah, it really narrows.
Right. The primary meaning of father loses that expansive social architect nuance and shrinks down to just mean male progenitor.
And what's fascinating here is that is exactly where the trap snaps shut on the modern reader. We're sitting here reading a document translated in the 17th century, but we are processing it with a 21st century biological dictionary installed in our heads.
It's like how the word computer used to mean a human being who did math.
Oh yeah, the human computers.
Right. And now it means a machine. So if you read an old 19th century document about a computer complaining about their sore hands from writing too much, you'd be totally confused. You'd think, why does a MacBook have hands?
That's a perfect analogy. It perfectly illustrates the mechanism of the confusion. You're applying a modern material definition to a historical term that meant something fundamentally different.
Yeah.
Modern ears hear a physical, scientific claim where the ancients simply heard a functional societal title. We think they're making this bizarre biological statement about the universe, like a giant man sitting in the clouds, when really they were making a legal and functional statement about order and authority.
So if English actively traps us into picturing a biological man, Lawmakers and theologians relying on this concept must have been forced to either, I don't know, accept the man in the sky imagery
Yeah.
or entirely re-engineer their language to escape it.
Right.
Did any languages actually manage to build an escape hatch for this? Like a way to talk about the divine without accidentally painting a picture of a human being?
They did, actually. The sources highlight the Arabic language as a prime example of actively engineering vocabulary to avoid this exact problem.
Oh, really?
Yeah, specifically when it comes to the term Allah.
Because if we look at the English word God, it has its own set of structural baggage that invites that exact biological confusion.
Exactly. I mean, from a purely logical and linguistic standpoint, the English word God is highly malleable. You can make it plural gods.
Right.
You can give it a feminine form goddess. The very structure of the word allows the concept to be categorized and multiplied, just like humans or animals.
Whereas the Arabic word Allah does not function that way at all. It's just linguistically locked down.
Totally. Unlike the English word, Allah is utterly unique in its linguistic architecture. It has no plural form whatsoever. It literally cannot be mathematically multiplied. Furthermore, it has no feminine form, nor a masculine form in the biological sense. It's a singular, gender-neutral, proper noun. And because it doesn't translate directly to human titles like Father or Lord, it actively removes the mental image of a human-like figure.
Okay, but wait, let me play devil's advocate here for a second.
Sure.
Isn't anthropomorphism a feature, not a bug? I mean, humans are intensely tribal creatures. We follow leaders. We understand hierarchies. We don't naturally rally around, abstract linguistic architectures.
That's fair.
So if you strip away that relatable dad imagery, don't you lose the emotional compliance of the masses? It seems like it would be much easier to keep a society in line if they're afraid of making a giant, powerful man angry.
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, you're hitting on the exact volatility that this linguistic structure was trying to avoid in the first place.
How so?
While emotional compliance feels powerful in the short term, it creates a wildly unstable society. Because if you rely on a relatable, human-like figure, your entire system of justice and morality becomes about appeasing a personality.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, it becomes, is the father angry today? Is the father pleased? It makes the foundation of your society entirely emotional and subjective.
Which means whoever claims to speak to the father can manipulate those emotions to control the population.
Correct. The term Allah is engineered to prevent that subjective shrinking. It forces the speaker to engage with the concept of a sovereign source without falling back on the lazy shortcut of picturing a volatile human being. You don't appease a personality, you align yourself with an objective reality.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because that actually makes sense of something else in our sources. I was looking at the section on the 99 names of Allah, and what struck me was how it acts almost like a hyper-specific functional checklist.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
Instead of projecting one biological dad figure onto the cosmos and just hoping he handles all the different jobs, protecting, feeding, judging, this system breaks the universe down into discrete actions.
The 99 names are the perfect answer to the question of how you maintain the function of the ancient paterfamilias without the biology of the man. They fulfill that ancient Greco-Roman definition far better than our modern English word father does, because they focus entirely on what is being done rather than who is doing it.
Right. Let's walk through some of the examples the text provides. Think about the historical function of the paterfamilias sustaining the household with resources. In the 99 names, you have Arazak, which translates to the provider.
And notice how that shifts the psychological focus, right?
Yeah.
It isolates the pure act of sustenance.
Yeah.
It doesn't require the provider to have DNA, a physical body, or a mood. It simply identifies the mechanism of provision itself.
Then you have the role of the legal guardian. The tenet points to Al-Wali, the protecting friend. Again, it's an action. It's guardianship and loyalty, totally devoid of biological requirements. But the one that really caught my eye was Al-Hakam, the judge.
Oh, Al-Hakam is foundational because it establishes the ultimate reality as the absolute source of law, societal order, and intellectual justice.
And if you think about how that functionally changes a society, it's profound. Like, if the universe's ultimate reality is Al-Hakam, then a human court system isn't trying to guess what a sky king wants based on ancient superstitions. It's trying to objectively replicate the action of justice itself.
Precisely. It separates the concept of justice from emotional appeasement. You are no longer asking, what does the maker look like? You are asking, what does the maker do?
Right.
The text also highlights Al-Muhaimin, the overseer, ensuring safety and vigilance, and Al-Khaliq, the creator, the ultimate architect. When you map the universe this way, you aren't looking at a who, you are looking at a system of perfect actions.
The sources draw a fascinating parallel here.
Yeah.
Because once you understand the divine as a collection of governing actions rather than a physical being, it completely changes how human beings build their own laws.
It really does.
Whether through direct exposure to these functional Arabic texts during the Middle Ages or through, a sort of parallel philosophical evolution, Renaissance lawmakers in the West started doing the exact same thing. They began treating the divine not as a biological ruler, but as a logical anchor for human rights.
And this raises an important question. Well, we really have to remember the historical context of the Renaissance to understand why this shift was so desperate and necessary.
Sure.
European society was transitioning out of the Middle Ages. The concept of the divine right of kings, this idea that a monarch's authority was absolute because they were effectively the earthly extension of the biological father in heaven, it was failing.
Failing catastrophically. Europe was tearing itself apart over sectarian wars, essentially fighting over which version of the father they were supposed to be appeasing.
Exactly. They needed a universal, objective standard for law that wasn't tied to a specific royal bloodline or some volatile, emotional deity. Renaissance philosophers needed to anchor human law in something immutable.
So what does this all mean? It makes me think of it like the difference between a king's mood dictating the speed limit versus a mathematical formula dictating the speed limit.
Okay, I like that.
A king might wake up angry and decide everyone driving over 20 miles an hour goes to prison, right? But a mathematical formula is immune to a bad mood. The Renaissance thinkers realized the mathematical formula is a much safer foundation for a society.
That captures the philosophical leap perfectly. They needed that mathematical formula for human behavior. If the ultimate reality of the universe is characterized by perfect justice, as in al-Hakam, or perfect provision, like Arazak, then a legitimate human government must attempt to replicate those actions down here on Earth.
The divine becomes the blueprint.
Yes. And if a human king is not providing for his people or is not protecting their safety, if he is violating the logical anchor of the universe, then his laws are invalid.
Wow.
This functional view of the universe is what paves the way for early constitutional law and the very concept of inherent human rights. Human rights don't come from a biological sky father handing down a favor. They are a logical necessity of a universe built on the actions of justice and provision.
It forces you, as a listener or a citizen, to focus entirely on the maintenance of societal order.
Yeah.
You don't appease an action. You emulate it.
Right.
You seek justice because the ultimate reality is justice. It anchors human behavior in logic rather than biological metaphors.
And it leads to the construction of a functioning, equitable society rather than endless, unanswerable theological debates about physical forms. Words are not just passive labels we stick onto things. They are active frameworks that shape how we perceive reality, how we structure our laws, and ultimately how we define our obligations to one another.
This has been such an illuminating journey through the sources today. We started by looking at this massive mechanical failure in translation. We saw how the ancient Mediterranean concept of the paterfamilias, this functional social architect, was translated into the English word father in 1611.
Right.
And we saw how our modern shift toward a strictly biological dictionary just warped our understanding of those ancient texts, making them sound like literal physical claims rather than legal titles.
We then explored the incredible precision of the Arabic language, how a singular gender-neutral word like Allah actively prevents the human baggage that comes with English words like God.
Exactly.
And how the 99 names fulfill the ancient role of the paterfamilias by focusing entirely on actions, the provider, the judge, the protector, rather than biological states of being.
And finally, we discovered how viewing the universe through the lens of these functional governing actions served as the ultimate logical anchor for Renaissance-era human law, moving us away from the whims of kings and toward universal human rights.
It really emphasizes that language is a living organism. It evolves constantly, and if we aren't paying close attention to its shifting contours, it can easily obscure our own history from us.
Which leaves me with a final lingering thought for you, the listener, as we wrap up this deep dive. Today we learned how a slow, subtle shift in the definition of a single word, from a social role to a biological fact, caused centuries of modern readers to completely misinterpret ancient foundational concepts. If a word as seemingly permanent as father could shift so drastically under our feet without us really noticing? What foundational words in our current constitutions, our laws, or our daily lives are slowly shifting in meaning right now?
That's a great question.
400 years from today, what perfectly logical concepts of ours will future generations look back on and completely misunderstand just because their dictionaries have changed?
It really is a profound question. We have an obligation to remain vigilant, not just about the language we inherit, but, the language we're passing down.
You really do. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the words you take for granted, and we will catch you next time.